Let's be real. Some of us, your girl included, wanted more hips, but ended up with more dips. But since we are all fashioned after the good Lord himself, I guess we gotta figure out how to deal. So for today's video, we are going to be discussing how we fit our hips and our dips. So if you want to take this journey with me, then you know what to do. Keep watching. Hey Stitchers, it's your girl Kris. Welcome if you're new or welcome back to the channel. Now let me tell you, when God may share hip, me did it back of the line because your girl is hip deficient. Instead, good baby Jesus gave me hip dips. Like, what even is a hip dip? Why, baby Jesus? Why don't I have nice, juicy hips? Why do I have dips? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Now, over time, I have come to terms with the body that I have. It did take me a while. I'm not even going to lie about it. But I guess sewing sort of humbles you in that it helps you uncover all of the things that society says is wrong with our bodies. And in uncovering it, we can either decide to figure out how to embrace it, or we can curl up into a ball and die. Well, I ain't about to die, you guys. Jesus, I hope that's not the case. So I definitely had to learn how to work with the body that I have, and that includes my hips, or lack thereof. Now, if you are in the same boat as I am, I'm hoping that today's video will help us shed some light on how we can work with our God-given bodies. Now, when it comes to fitting hips, the first thing I want to mention is how we choose the starting size for our patterns. Now, I went through an entire video or two here on the channel helping you guys figure out how to choose the starting size, but I did base those videos more on bodices. Now, when we're choosing the starting size for our skirts and for our pants, the best course of action is to choose the size that best accommodates the hip line. Of course, for many of us, this will mean blending out to a bigger size to accommodate the waistline, or conversely, to blend down to a smaller size at the waistline. So what you do, you grab your pattern, and yes, you might need some tracing paper, and you trace out the size starting at the waistline. When we get to our hip line, however, we want to blend out to either the larger or the smaller size to accommodate the hips. We do not want to choose the size based on our waistline, and then we have difficulty fitting our hips. We want to make sure we are addressing both of these body circumferences, the waistline and the hip line. Now, on many patterns, you will find a demarcation of where the hip line is. On the Big 5 patterns, the hip line is demarcated by a circle with a cross on the inside, just as for the bust line and for the waistline. Now, for the pencil skirt, the finished garment measurement for the hip for the size 18, which I would be having a 42-inch hip, is 46 inches. Now, once we know where the hip line is, this is the point that we want to choose our size for. Now, in my case, I usually have to blend up to around a size 20 to accommodate the waistline, and then blend back down to a size 18 for my hip line, because my waistline circumference measurement and my hip line circumference measurement do not usually fit under the same sizing, particularly so far as the Big 5 is concerned. Now, if you need a little bit more help in terms of how to take those measurements, then you can go ahead and check the How to Take Your Measurements video here on the channel. I'll leave the link in right here. I walk you through and demonstrate how to record your body measurements. Now, once we have the appropriate size for the hip line, the next thing we want to do is to make sure the hip line corresponds with the hip line on your body. This may mean either raising or lowering the hip point. I hardly, if ever, hear anybody talking about adjusting the position of the hip line on your pattern pieces to coincide with the body measurement. Now, in my second fitting video talking about length adjustments, I did show you guys how to adjust your pattern pieces for your length adjustments. And the hip line is one such adjustment. You want to make sure that wherever the hip line falls on the pattern also is where the hip line falls on your body. Now, typically the hip line on the pattern pieces are about 9 to 10 inches below the waistline, but you might find that your hip line is either higher or lower depending on where your waistline falls. Now, I think my hip line measures about 10 or 11 inches from my waistline, and so it means that sometimes I do have to go in and lower the position of the hip line. That means that the curve that often is incorporated into the hip line of a pattern piece, particularly when working with a pencil type skirt, fits where my hip line is. Otherwise, you will find that the fullness for your hip line falls in the wrong place. And I cannot tell you how that can throw off the entire look of your finished skirt or trouser. So make sure, one, you are choosing the correct size for your hips, and two, you are making sure that the hip line of the garment coincides with the hip line of your bodice. And the only way to do that is to take your measurements and then to adjust upwards or downwards as is necessary. Now, once you have completed both of these adjustments and you're sure that you have enough width to go around the circumference of your hips, and you are certain that the length is in the right place, then we can talk about other fitting adjustments that you might need. Now, in my case, I have discerned that I need a hollow hip adjustment. And this one really rang some bells in my video talking about Simplicity 9463. A lot of y'all left comments on that video saying I definitely needed to talk about and demonstrate the hollow hip adjustment. Now, you guys, to be absolutely honest with you, I'm not sure if this adjustment has just been a figment of my imagination. Now, way back when, I used to make toiles for everything. Every single garment that I was making up, you bet your bottom dollar that your girl had a toile. And I discovered when I was working on pencil skirts and A-line skirts in particular, I would notice that the hemline of my skirts would cave inwards towards my knee. And then it would add some fullness right at my center front. Now, one of the things I also used to do when working with my toiles was to draw on what I called balance lines. So I would mark in the grain line corresponding to my pattern piece. Then I would do perpendicular lines to that grain line at my hip line, lower down towards the hemline, and further up towards my waistline. Like in between my waistline and my hip line, I would have a balance line. I would have one demarcating where my hips were. Then I would have one between my hemline and my hip line as well. And I noticed that a lot of the times that the lines that were meant to be at a 90-degree angle to my grain line sort of sloped downwards at the side seams of my skirt. And I tried to figure out why that might be. Now, I did a lot of research, and to be honest, now that I think about it, I'm not really sure if it's something that I was able to have answered through Google. I actually don't think it was. I think it might have been just a concept that I came up with a little bit of trial and error. Now, I might be wrong, but I have recently Googled hollow hip adjustment and I haven't found anything. So that makes me a little bit more convinced that it must have been something that I came up with. So if you Google it and you do not find a hollow hip adjustment, then that means that this adjustment may have been originated by your girl. Perhaps, and I'm pretty sure that's the case, it might be known by something else in the sewing community, and maybe it is the case that many of you who are a lot more proficient than I am, who might be professional tailors and so on and so forth, might be telling me that I'm chatting a whole bunch of crap and this is not like an industry accepted adjustment or whatever. So I will say I am not an expert. And a lot of the fitting adjustments that I do have come about as a result of trial and error and screwing up way too much fabric. And so I am just sharing with you guys what I have discovered and what works for me in the hopes that it might just help one of you watching this video. Right, so now back to this hollow hip adjustment. I noticed that the balance lines towards my side seams dipped downwards. And in order to fix your balance lines, you sort of want to make sure that the vertical lines are vertical and the horizontal lines are horizontal. And so I started pinning up what I deemed to be excess length at my side seam in an effort to get my horizontal balance lines straight. And I discovered that if I removed a 1/4 inch in length at my side seam, just around at my hip line, and blended it out to nothing towards my center front, that my balance lines would be perpendicular to my grain line. And so I started doing this adjustment on my flat pattern pieces as well. And in order to do the adjustment, it is a really, really simple adjustment I have found. I simply drew a horizontal line across my flat paper pattern, measured up a 1/4 inch along the side seam allowance, and then I would cut through my line, my original line, leaving a hinge point at the center front, and then I would pull my pattern piece upwards towards the 1/4 inch marking and then stick it into place. Now I am going to demonstrate because many of you, like myself, might just be visual learners and much prefer to see it in action. But I figured I would walk you through it first and then you would get a better understanding and hopefully be better able to appreciate when I get to the point of the actual demonstration. Now, once I had shifted my lower skirt piece upwards by a 1/4 inch, it meant that my grain line was now askew, but it was only askew below that portion of the pattern that I had cut and adjusted. And it meant that I had to go back in and fix up my grain line and often my center front. Now, where your center front piece is cut on the fold, you need it to be a straight line. If it is skewed off, when you butt it up to your fold line, you will notice that there is a gap. And so I had to go back in and fill back in my center front piece, as well as fix my grain line. And that also meant I had to remove additional width at my side seam. But again, I will demonstrate the steps in just a moment. And you guys, this little adjustment, and I do have to say it's little because it's not complicated at all, has made the world of difference so far as fitting my skirts and now my trousers is concerned. No, I don't do this adjustment when I'm working with gathered skirts or circle skirts. I just feel like the volume of those two types of skirt sort of conceals the problem, but it is very evident in pencil skirts and A-line skirts. So I will take the time to make that adjustment when I'm working with a pencil skirt and an A-line skirt. Now, in 2024, I also really delved into my pant fitting journey. I'm still not where I want to be, but I am a hell of a lot better than I was in previous years. And I have found that the same considerations apply for fitting trousers. You want to choose your hip size or your trouser size based on the size that best corresponds with your hip. And it is, I would say, a little bit more important with trousers than with skirts because the crotch length is also affected by your hip size. So 9 times out of 10, when you choose your trouser pattern based on your hip line, you get a better fit at your crotch line than if you were to choose a size based on, let's say, your waist, because maybe your argument is that your waist is your biggest point, and so you choose your trousers by your waist, and then you end up with way too much length at your crotch line, and you end up with like bagginess around your front crotch, and you can't figure it out. And I will say, from my very limited stance as a pant fitter, choosing your pant size based on your hip line also makes a huge difference. I am living testimony that picking your starting size for your bottoms based on your hip size is invaluable. Trust me, try it and see. You are going to have to make adjustments often by blending out up or downwards for your waistline, but your hip line being the correct size for your hips changes the game, you guys. It really, really does. Now that I have spoken about what the hollow hip adjustment is and how I sort of figured out that I needed this adjustment and the steps I have taken to sort of perfect the fit around my hip dips, let us get into the actual tutorial. So grab yourself a pattern, grab yourself some tracing paper, a very sharp pencil, some scrap paper, your scissors, and some magic tape, and let's do this. Right, so to demonstrate our adjustment, I am using the skirt pattern from this pattern. This is McCall's 8139. It is a pattern that I do want to make, but I don't know when I'm actually going to get around to making it. So I figured if I demonstrated the adjustment on the skirt piece, it means that by the time it comes for me to actually make up this pattern, I would have had one of my adjustments done. Now I am only going to demonstrate the adjustment on the skirt front piece, but you are going to want to repeat the same steps on your skirt back piece. Now I have traced off a size 18 at the hip line. The size 18 is intended for a hip of 42 inches, and I am a hip of 42 inches. Now, according to the pattern, the size 18 is intended for a 32-inch waist, and then the size 20 is for a 34-inch waist. Now, I am a 33.5-inch waist, and it really just depends on the ease in this pattern which one of those two sizes I will end up using for my waistline. Now, at the moment, I have traced off the size 18, but I've also put the demarcation for the size 20 right at the slanted pocket. Now, once I get to consult the finished garment measurements for the waistline, and that happens to be on the bodice pieces of this pattern, then I'll be able to make that decision. But that is neither here or there for today's adjustment. Right. So now that I have my piece traced off, I do have a black fine tip pen, and I will be using this for the demonstration. However, if you are at home and you are doing this adjustment, then you want to use a sharpened pencil. A pen or a marker tend to have a thicker tip than does a sharpened pencil, and it does add a little bit of extra bulk to your lines. In addition, if you make a mistake with a pencil, you can erase it, whereas with a pen, it's sort of set in stone. But because it's easier for you guys to see the pen marks, then I'm going to be using a pen for the demonstration. Now, this marking right here is the hip line, and the finished measurement for the size 18 hip is 45 inches. Now, industry standard for a fitted skirt is about 2 inches of ease in the hip line, and as I said, I am a 42. 2 inches would take it up to a 44, and then there's an additional inch, so that means I will have 3 inches of ease at my hip line, and I am perfectly fine with that. Now, I'm just going to draw a line right at the lengthen shorten line. I'm going to mark up a 1/4 inch from that line. So this was my lengthen shorten line. They're usually a double line. I have only drawn one, and I'm going to label it line A. Now, if your pattern does not have a lengthen shorten line that is near to your hip point, you might want to consider drawing one in. Now, for absolute accuracy, you could draw the line straight through your hip line like so, but I want to keep mine intact because for future reference, I want to know what my hip circumference measurement is. So I don't want to distort the hip line. So I've just gone a little bit below. It's not going to make much of a difference in this skirt because it does have a fairly straight side seam. And so I am just using that as my line A. You might draw in your line A. Right above my line A, as I said, I'm making a 1/4 inch adjustment, and I have determined that I need a 1/4 inch adjustment, as I said, because I have made numerous toiles. And I found that pinching out a 1/4 inch out of the side seam of my fabric fitting garments helped my balance lines to lie flat. So I'm going up a 1/4 inch. You might need less, or you might even need more. Now, once that is in place, I'm just going to cut through my line A, and I'm cutting over to my center front. So in this skirt, the first line here is my center front line. The additional lines form my fold on facing. So that means when I cut from the opposite side, I'm actually going to be cutting through the facing piece, and I'm leaving a hinge point right at my center front. Now, if you're working with a skirt piece that just has a fold line for the center front, it means you'll carry your cut line almost to the end of your skirt piece, leaving a tiny hinge at the fold point. Now, because this particular pattern has a grown on facing for the shirt dress, I am cutting in from my facing up to the center front marking, which I have put in right here. So now we have a hinge point. Now I'm actually going to bring the lower portion of my skirt upwards so that my line A now lines up with my 1/4 inch marking. And we want to make sure that our pattern piece is remaining flat. We do not want to have any buckling anywhere. And to help with that, I'm just going to rest my weights down, and then I'm grabbing my magic tape and I'm sticking it into place. Right, so this is what it looks like. Very, very easy and simple adjustment. Now, as I was explaining earlier, once we swing our skirt piece upwards, we are going to affect the grain line and any other straight markings we have below the cut point. So this is my cut point, and below that point, my grain line has gone askew. So I'm going to grab my gridded ruler, and these are in my Amazon storefront, and I have linked it down below in the description box in case you want to grab one. These are very, very useful for your flat pattern adjustments. And I'm going to line up my ruler with the top of my grain line right down to the cut point. And once I know that is straight, I am then going to fix the grain line marking. Now, if I hold it up, you will realize that this pencil marking over here was my initial grain line. I'm hoping you can see it. But now that I have corrected my grain line, this is where my grain line marking now is. So there's about 1/8 of an inch difference. Yep, 1/8 of an inch between my original grain line and my corrected grain line. So if you're using something like stripes or plaids, this is going to be quite evident when you try to line up your piece. Your grid or your plaid or your stripe or whatever is not going to be completely on grain beneath your cut point if you do not re-establish your grain line. Now, once I have re-established my grain line, I'm going to repeat the process on this particular skirt for my center front piece and for all of the other vertical lines. So I'm just straightening them back out below the cut point. And here we go. So when I'm using this pattern piece, I'm going to use the markings in pen in order to line up my grain line and then to establish my fold line and my facing lines and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to the very center front piece that we have cut, I'm actually going to need some scrap paper. So I'm just going to cut off a piece of scrap paper. And then I am going to stick it behind my skirt piece, just a little bit above my cut line and all the way down to my hemline. Now, once I have that stuck into place, I am going to line my ruler up the same way with my center front cut line, like so. And then I am going to draw a new cut line below our horizontal marking. So instead of my center front piece ending here, it's now going to end right along the black line over here. So when I cut back out my pattern piece, I'm going to cut along this line. Now, once I have that all together, I'm going to measure at the hemline from my original cut line over to my new center front cut line. And that is, how is that, 3/16 of an inch? I think that's what it is. It's a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch, but not quite 1/4 inch. And this means I have added additional circumference measurement at my hemline. Now, if I do not want this additional width, which you probably will not if you want to maintain the integrity of the pattern, you're going to want to go over to your side seam over here, and the same amount that we have added at our center front over here, we are going to take it away from our side seam. And this will mean that it will balance out, and then there will be no additional width at our hemline. Now, of course, if you're not bothered by that additional width, and in this case, it's not a lot, it's going to be about just a little less than 1/2 inch. That might not bother you. It is going to bother me, and so I'm going to take it back out. So I'm just measuring across 3/16 of an inch at my side seam, and then I'm going to draw a new side seam from my cut point to my new marking, just like so. So we have added additional width at our center front because we had to fix our grain line, and we are now taking it off at our side seam. Once that is done, I am going to just true up my hemline, and then you guys, I am going to trim along the entire circumference of my pattern. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate the trimming. I think everybody knows how to trim their pattern by now, because I do need to go back in and verify whether or not I'm going to want the size 20 at my waistline blended down to an 18 at my hip line, or whether I can get away with just using the straight size 18. All right, you guys, there you had it, a full demonstration on how to do the hollow hip adjustment. I'm really hoping that you guys found this tutorial very instructional, and that when you perform this adjustment to your skirt and trouser pieces, you will notice a huge difference in the fit of the hips or the dips of your skirts and trousers. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to go ahead and give your girl a thumbs up. It really is appreciated. Leave me a comment down below and let me know if you found this video helpful. Let me know as well if you have other fitting woes that you would appreciate a full tutorial on. Let me know whether you have hips or dips, whether you like your hips or your dips, or whether you have simply learned to live with what you have. And hopefully with this tutorial, you will learn to appreciate your hips or dips just a little bit better. Now, if you have gotten this far in today's video and you're not a subscriber, please do consider subscribing. And if you found this video particularly helpful, I would really appreciate if you shared it with a friend or two. We might find that there are more persons in our little boat than I thought. Now, until next time, you guys, stay calm, stay cool, stay safe, and absolutely keep sewing. Peace.